I am going to talk about the FHIR server. Before that, I'm going to talk about a cardiovascular risk calculator app that we built because it demos a little bit better. We actually rebranded it after we submitted it, so it's not what's in your program. We're calling it Cardiac Consultant. So I need to advance slides, which is this thing, I think. Cool. So heart disease is actually the leading cause of death in the US, including heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular diseases. Research has shown that lifestyle changes, things like quitting smoking and losing weight, actually can have a pretty big impact in the death rate around heart disease. So we built a cardiovascular risk calculator app. We know that has come about a lot. We saw a demo of one yesterday. People have taken many approaches to this. We think ours is a bit unique, and we want to talk about it for a little bit. Our goal was to allow physicians to have meaningful conversations with patients. So not just say, hey, you need to lose weight, but actually show data and explain consequences, use evidence-based medicine, show how risks can potentially change over time. Ultimately, a lifestyle change can often be as effective as medicine and way cheaper. This app was actually just announced as a finalist in the Cerner App Challenge. We'll be presenting in a few weeks in Kansas City. So meet Nancy. She comes into the doctor's office. She has a history of cardiovascular disease in her family. She asks, should she be concerned? The doctor launches the app. It loads up with the data from FHIR. This is all basic stuff. At the end of that, it actually shows which things it wasn't able to get from the FHIR instance, because sometimes the data is not there. Sometimes the EHR doesn't implement those resources. This way, the doctor can go in and make adjustments after the fact. So all that data is pulled in to the filters over on the left side. They're color-coded based on degree of risk that is associated. And any default values that we weren't able to pull from the EHR are marked off with a label that says it's their default. And we've basically chosen values that zero out the model, so that they have no positive or negative impact. But the doctor is aware that that data might need to be put in. So we're, in this tool, using 3 different clinical models. Framingham lipid model has been around for a long time. That's the default when the tool comes up, actually. It's pretty well understood by physicians. It requires cholesterol levels to be fed into it. Not every patient has that on record. The BMI model is a simpler one. Everybody has a BMI, so that calculation is pretty easy. The Reynolds models come around more recently. It has been shown to be much more accurate, but also requires a bunch of additional data like C-reactive proteins, family history, that may also not be available in the system. In this case, actually, because we don't have C-reactive proteins, we show a warning message that the doctor is aware. It's probably not actually 1.2%. It's probably something higher once you get the real data in there. Over on the right side, there is a list of the factors that have contributed to each of these models. And actually, as you flip between the models, you can see that those factors change, which sort of explains how the models work and what pieces go into them. So next, there's a heat map. This is the presentation of this data with risk on the y-axis and blood cholesterol on the x-axis was recommended by some clinical panels. The advantage of it is that where a patient falls on that heat map can help illustrate what kind of treatment would be most effective for them. So if they're over on the high LDL side, probably they need to get their cholesterol in check. Perhaps statin medication would be recommended. If they're high risk but they don't have high LDL, it's more likely that they have a metabolic condition like diabetes or PCOS or something that can be treated very differently. And in the middle, the typical recommendation is diet or exercise, strengthen your cardiovascular system, that sort of thing. So this can help inform a doctor on which direction to treat a patient. At the bottom, there's also a breakdown of the various risk factors that go into this. In the case of Nancy, actually, you'll see that diabetes is actually a higher risk category than smoking. So if your recommendation was just, well, you should quit smoking, in fact, you're not looking at the whole picture. There's also a summary at the bottom with just an easy takeaway of what factors are going into this. So this allows us to make, not just to see a snapshot of the patient in real time, but to actually make predictions over time. So her risk is only 15% right now, but what about 10 years from now? What about 20 years from now? She hasn't made any changes, then her risk actually goes up to a 1 in 3 chance. That's significant. Maybe she can be taking steps now to avoid having more issues in the future. So this tool lets you sort of run out these scenarios and see what will happen. After about age 50, age itself becomes a contributing factor, which people can't really do anything about, obviously. But so you can also play out different kinds of scenarios. What if she were to quit smoking? You can see her risk drop significantly right away. What if she were to change her bad cholesterol? The risk drops in a different way. This allows a patient and a physician to really have a meaningful conversation about what treatment might be most effective for that patient and fit into their lifestyle. What's also cool about the interface here is that we can actually plug in different clinical models. So in a future state, we could put in something about diabetes or certain types of cancer where we actually, data that we pull from the EHR could feed into something very similar, put some different calculations on it, be able to make similar kinds of recommendations. So as we're going through the process of building an app, we haven't been doing FHIR app development for a very long time. We're getting a sense of this whole landscape. And we built the app specifically for Cerner in this case because it was for the Cerner challenge. But we'd like to be able to use it in Epic. We'd like to be able to use it on other people's pipelines that, to feed up FHIR data. So really we want something that's portable. And what we found is there are still some challenges to that. Interoperability is great when it works, if everyone's kind of doing the same thing in the same way, but FHIR is a massive spec. So the EHR might not have the data you need. What if, for example, this app needed genomics data? Right? Well, maybe Cerner doesn't have any genomics data. Where can we get it from? Does it have a FHIR interface? The EHR might also not have features you need. Cerner and Epic right now are both in version 2 of the FHIR spec. I should say R2, right? Because V2 is something different. But what if there are resources from FHIR that we need to make our app actually work that are only available in R3 or in R4? What do we do then? We also found actually that just asking a simple question like, is this patient a smoker? Is actually a really hard thing to answer by looking at raw data in the EHR. You have to look through all the encounters. You have to figure out, what the doctor coded about are they a smoker or not. There are about 27 different codes. Some of them might be negative. The patient is not a smoker. Perhaps the patient was a smoker in the past but isn't currently. So it would be great to have some sort of calculation engine that you could put in place so that the app wouldn't have to have all that logic itself. It could just ask a simple question and get back a sort of higher order reasoning about it. So what if we could really fulfill the promise of interoperability? This is partly what a lot of the FHIR servers that are out there are for. We, in fact, have a FHIR server. It was the one that was submitted in the ONC challenge. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about it. We believe that EHRs aren't the only people who have health data. What if health data could be democratized? You have genomics data. You have imagery data. Let's make that available so that people can consume it through FHIR. So our Phoenix FHIR server, it's completely open source. It's Node.js, which some developers prefer over some of the other languages. I won't get into a debate with anybody here about that. But we talk to me afterward. It's easy to implement. It's built up basically as a coding framework. So rather than a point-and-click sort of hosted solution, really, it's something that you host yourself. But if you've got a development team, you build some data adapters. Our framework really handles all of the FHIR conformance. It handles security, which I'll talk about in a moment. We actually have a GraphQL layer as well. You just basically write an interface that talks to your data source and puts it into a FHIR format, and then we sort of handle all the rest of the interoperability pieces. It also supports any version of FHIR. So we parse structure definitions and generate code based off of them. So if you have your own unique structured definitions, we can build a version of the server that does that as well. Other servers have similar things. So one of the key things of ours is that we built it from the ground up to be secure. That was part of the point of the ONC challenge, but really we're a cybersecurity company. We think that security is really important, and it's a thing that people haven't necessarily been talking about too much at FHIR conferences. This server has a whole bunch of security best practices built into it. It's validating all the data as it comes in and out to make sure it actually conforms with FHIR standards. There aren't SQL injections or other kinds of weird parameters people are trying to pass in, raw HTML that's going to crash your browser or do crazy things. So we're validating all that. Has full support for OAuth and tokens and specs. And the framework itself actually enforces authorization through scopes. So the idea that you're a patient, I can only see, I'm a patient, I can only see data for my own patient record. If I try to access somebody else's patient record, it doesn't matter what the implementer in that particular system has done in their adapter code between our framework and their database. Our framework will block that. It will be, no, you aren't allowed to access this data. So we're sort of enforcing security on top of whoever's using our platform, which we think is a good thing. It's something that as a developer you shouldn't have to worry about. This should take care of that for you. You should understand security, but you don't have to implement all those the hard parts about it. Part of the ONC challenge actually was phase 2 was we had to get the server up and running, and other companies had to come and try to find vulnerabilities in it and break it. Actually, OneUp, who's speaking next, found some vulnerabilities. We posted them all up on GitHub. We've fixed them all along with pull requests. That's all transparent. We encourage anybody else to try to look for vulnerabilities in it. We believe very strongly in transparency and security, and that as a community we can come together to build secure things. And actually we've advanced the technology a lot beyond what we had in the original contest. We're pretty proud of it. So why might you want to use the Phoenix FHIR server, or really any FHIR server, over just connecting directly to an EHR? There are a bunch of different use cases here. I'm happy to talk to you about them more. Come find me outside during the break or whatever. So if you have your own data that's not in an EHR, throw it up into the server. You can use the server to actually combine many different data sources that might be in your organization behind a common gateway. For example, if your scheduling system or your billing system or your claims system are all disparate things, you can stand up a single FHIR interface that connects all those pieces together. And then you worry about patient connection between those different systems on the back end so that somebody who's using your FHIR interface doesn't actually have to worry about those things. You can use it to build a standalone server, a sandbox that maybe mirrors what your production system looks like, because you can set up the same structure, definitions, and capabilities, read, write, whatever. Also, a lot of the EHRs right now have limited support for write back. They're slowly building them out, but it's taking a long time. There's still questions about how to validate data and how to trust data coming in from outside sources. And what if your app or apps that your organization is building needs to have that capability now? Well, you can put a server like this in the middle to accept data being written back, and then use some back-end sync processes, maybe V3 or CVDi or something, to actually get the data back into the EHR. So all these things become possible when you have a simple way to stand up a FHIR server. So everyone likes free stuff. Check out asymmetrik.com/FHIR. We have a whole bunch of resources up there. We have the whole open source Phoenix FHIR server code. We have some demo videos for Cardiac Consultant. We'll actually have a demo link up soon so you can play around with it. We have blog posts and podcasts about what Asymmetrik's been doing in healthcare, and we wrote a song about FHIR. Check it out. And that's all I've got.